do just a little refresher here. When we talk about a text being deuterocanonical, we are referring to one of those 16 books, including the Wisdom of Solomon, that do not appear as a universal rule in the Hebrew Bible, but were included in the Septuagint, the Christian Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible with other texts. These were texts whose status as belonging to the official canon of the Bible was not wholly accepted. These other books were held back from official inclusion for various reasons, but were claimed and carried on through the stewardship of Christianity. 10 of the 16 appear in the Roman Catholic Bible. Think Tobit, Judith, Baruch. These do not appear in our Protestant Bibles. The ones in the racks in front of you do not have them. That is, unless you have a Protestant Bible that in your hand that says with the Apocrypha on it. In that case, you will find 13 of those 16 books in it. So who cares? What does it matter? What does it matter if they're in there or not? Well, there's some interesting things that come from texts being included in one and not in the other. And the biggest example that I can think of is 1st and 2nd Maccabees. These two books are included in the Apocrypha. They are not in the Bibles here in our pews. They are included not in the Jewish Tanakh either. And that's very striking because in 1st and 2nd Maccabees is the only mention of a certain holiday called Hanukkah and where that ritual comes from and what that ritual remembers. It is through the preservation of these books through Catholics who claimed them as being a part of their canon that indeed this holiday became something that became more and more celebrated around the world. There is meaning here. There is something to do. Now, deuterocanonical is a more recent, relatively more literary and academic term for these 16 books, which for thousands of years beforehand were simply called the Apocrypha. And these Jewish texts pushed out of the Hebrew canon, but then retrieved by Christians. Carol Newsom writes, Apocrypha, meaning hidden things. But it is not quite clear why this term is used to describe these books. In antiquity, hidden books sometimes referred to books that were restricted because they contained mysterious or esoteric teaching that were too profound for the average person to read or hear, except unless they were initiated first. Now, the practice of hidden books within the context of the Hebrew Bible, and even Christian scriptures too, is not unique to the books that we dub as Apocrypha, capital A. Think the book of Ezekiel, for example. With its wild visions and captivating motifs, this book, included in all Jewish and Christian texts, was once taught in ancient times that only students and scholars of Torah should read. And even then, not until you're 30 years old. Because without the proper life experience, without the proper framework, the proper training, one could be scandalized by such a radical text such as Ezekiel. So, what is so radical about our text this morning? What is found in the wisdom of Solomon that is so mysterious that people need some kind of understanding, some kind of preparatory knowledge, at least according to Protestants, against its influence before reading? And that is a question without a single answer. That is a question for a council of rabbis and priests long dead. So let's think for a moment about what wisdom is, because that is what this text is about. Wisdom and its relationship to humanity. The text tells us that it is both a piece of God's Spirit and it is a friend to us, and one that seeks our friendship in return. But simpler than that, what is wisdom as we experience it here in our lives? Because it is more than simply knowing things. We know many things. I think all of us can think of someone who knows many things and yet does not have a drop of wisdom in them. Because wisdom pierces through what we know, pierces through what we feel, all the way to the deepest level to inspire our understanding of what we know. It gives us new eyes, new perspectives on the day-to-day. It is what teaches us that the stove is hot, yes, but that the stove hurts. That's wisdom. Wisdom is the reason that we still teach children Aesop's fables, though they are very out of date. They still back up early life lessons. Wisdom is the reason why we still read the poetry of Rumi, when indeed thousands and thousands of years have passed. But when our hearts are sick or lonely, they heal. Wisdom is the reason why we still read and teach the parables of Jesus, because they are not merely conveying information to us, but because they use their particulars, animals, verses, mustard seeds, as a vehicle for the human mind into something deeper, something more lasting, something more foundational about our experience of being alive, seeking to mingle with the divine. Because we can't really, as human beings, most of us anyway, cannot make that jump into those icy waters. We need something to gradually help us in, to get acclimated before fully swimming. And this wisdom speaks to us in voices that are just as loud and confident as they were when they spoke to our grandparents and their grandparents and theirs and theirs and theirs and theirs. The radical thing about wisdom is that when we access it, when we return the favor of wisdom's friendship to us, it gives us the mind, the soul, the eyes to transcend the hardship, the ugliness, the confusion, the particularities of the day-to-day in order to keep going, to rise above it, to think and feel and love above it all in order to put one foot in front of the other, to continue to build and grow and change and create, to not give up, even if the particulars of any specific moment might tell you that that's a really good idea. But it's not just on the bad end of things. It's on the other too. That when life is good, which it is quite often, I'd like to say, when we have our blessings around us and contentment is in our heart, wisdom still speaks and awakens that deep gratitude within us that gives way to joyful living, that sort of blessing that begets a blessing to others. That this is what it means to befriend wisdom as she has befriended us. Because once that relationship is established, the text reminds us that something will happen. The text reminds us that God did not create death, that we indeed were made to be imperishable, but that is not the case now. And so God sends us wisdom. Because when we are claimed and when we claim God's wisdom, the text says that we are invited into eternity right along with it. That our lives become mingled with the eternal existing now, but then able to experience the peace and the comfort that eternity with God offers. That indeed nothing can pierce our hide, nothing breaches our walls. In our time now, and specifically I think through the next 3 months, when every advertising algorithm, every news headline written, every soundbite will be carefully and methodically crafted and created to put you in a place of unease where you cannot see beyond November 4th, where every media outlet is surgically creating content to derail our deeper thinking in favor of a crafted emergency of now. I hope that you will remember this radical truth, this disrupting truth, that wisdom still speaks to us, and in fact, perhaps speaks to us even more loudly in these moments, inviting us to stop, to remember that indeed there is more to this life than flesh and bone, that we are swimming in it always. All we need to do is let ourselves be taken by it, to rise above it, to dive deeply into wisdom and her care, that while we live and breathe and work now, we still participate in something greater, something deeper, more foundational, that saves us from coming undone.